There really should be no limits to the love that we give to ourselves, right? Lately I've been getting to this place in my life in which the love that I feel for myself, the love that I've began to embody and feel deeply for myself, it's kind of so intense, it's even hard to articulate it, right? And it's not because something, extravagant happened in my life. It's not because I started making a certain amount of money, or I got into a new relationship or a new job, so on and so forth. I've begun to feel this love, this deep love for myself, because of the love that I began to intentionally pour into myself, right? I think ultimately it's impossible for something to grow if you don't water it. It's impossible for something to bear fruit and to flourish if you don't tend to it. And I think when it comes on to our self-love, it is impossible for our self-love to grow if we don't pour into ourselves, if we don't tend to ourselves, if we don't give love to ourselves. How can our self-love possibly grow, right? A lot of us are waiting until we achieve a certain thing. A lot of us are waiting until we get a certain relationship. A lot of us are sort of waiting for the external world to sort of reflect something back at us before we begin to really pour love and feel love for ourselves, right? And in doing so, our love is always conditional on what is out here. Our love is always dependent and limited and confined to how the world responds to us, instead of us allowing ourselves to give ourselves love wherever we are in our lives, right? And this is why I talk so much about making everything that we do an act of self-love. And what I mean by that is making every action, everything that we do for ourselves and to ourselves, especially those small things that we do on the daily, making every single act an act of self-love, right? You wake up in the mornings, you're brushing your teeth, and you brush your teeth with the intention that you're doing this because you love yourself. You're taking a shower, and you're taking that shower with the intention that you're doing this because you love yourself. You're eating your breakfast, you're eating food, you're feeding your body, and you're doing it with the intention that you're doing this because you love yourself, right? And I'm not only talking about just saying the words just to say the words, right? I'm actually talking about allowing yourself to feel those deep emotions, right? Allowing yourself to embody those emotions. And this is something that I've been doing for like a year now, right? Every time I do something, I do it with that intention that I'm doing this because I love myself, right? And obviously, when you first start off, you're not going to have those deep feelings, right? Those deep feelings and emotions, they're not going to be intense. But the more I began to do it, the more I began to, act with intention, more I began to do things out of the intention that I'm doing it because I love myself, the more I began to feel that love, or a bigger piece of that love, or more of that love every single day. It's kind of like building a muscle. Going to the gym, you go into the gym, you work out, and every single time you work out, you get stronger. And I think when it comes on to our self-love, I think when it comes on to pouring into ourselves, we can build up that love. We can build up that love to an extent in which it becomes so intense, it's even impossible to even articulate it, right? That's something that I've began to experience for my own self. And that's how I know it's possible, right? It is possible when we're being intentional with the love that we pour into ourselves. It is possible when we're not withholding love for ourselves because of some future event, because we're not where we want to be, and we're giving love to ourselves wherever we are. We're giving love to ourselves right here. We're not placing limitations on our self-love, right? I think it's important for us to recognize that we can be the object of our own love, right? And when I say that we can be the object of our own love, what I mean is that we don't always have to wait for someone or something to project our love on, right? Or we don't have to wait until someone comes into our lives to give us that love, or reflect that love to us, or pour that love, to us, right? And obviously this is a beautiful thing, right? I think being able to love someone deeply and be loved by someone deeply is a very, 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 very beautiful thing, right? But you don't always have to wait on something external, right? You can be the giver and the receiver of your own love. You can reflect, you can pour your own love into yourself. And in doing so, you can become the source of your own love. And any love that is given to you externally is merely just an addition. It's complementary, right? It's not the source. It's not something that you continuously rely on, right? A lot of us in our lives, we're so heavily dependent on external love. The only time we even feel good about ourselves is if we have someone in our lives complimenting us. The only time we feel certain degrees of positivity for ourselves is if someone affirms us, is if someone validates us, right? So our love is always being limited. Our love is always being confined by how the world responds to us. But once you recognize that you can be the one to deposit love in your own world, you can be the one to feed yourself your own love. You can be the one to pour into yourself. Once you begin to recognize this, you no longer rely on the world for that love. You no longer rely on other people to make you feel good about yourself. You no longer rely on external circumstances for you to begin to feel some sort of love and positivity for yourself, because you recognize that your love, your validation, your acceptance is good enough. I was saying this to someone the other day that I've gotten to a point in my life, and I didn't even know I would sort of get to this point, right? But I've gotten to this point in my life in which compliments don't even affect me as much as they used to, right? And this kind of sounds arrogant to say this, right? It kind of sounds arrogant to say that compliments don't affect me as they used to, but what I mean by that is, if someone says something good about me, right? It feels good. I'm like, okay, yeah, I appreciate it, thank you. But it doesn't take me all the way up here, right? It's not something that I absolutely crave like I used to at one point. And the reason why it's something that I no longer crave is because everything that someone can say about me positively, right? Any compliment that someone can give to me, I've already given that compliment to myself, right? I don't want you guys to, I don't want this to go over you guys' heads, right? Everything that someone can say about me, I've already said those things to myself. If someone says I'm handsome, if someone says I'm attractive, I've already told myself I'm attractive. If someone says I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I've already told myself that I'm intelligent and I'm smart. If someone said, you have a good personality, I've already told myself I have a good personality, right? So they're not filling some void within me, right? They're not giving me something that I haven't given to myself. They're simply adding to what I've already affirmed about me. they're not the source of how I feel about myself. They're not the source of my self-love. They're not the source of my self-acceptance. They're not the source of anything in my life. Because I've allowed myself to become my own source. I've poured into myself to the point in which anything that they can say to me, I've already given those things to myself. And that's the point you want to get to in your life. You want to get to the point in your life in which anything that anyone says to you, any compliment, any sort of validation, anything that they say to you, you've already said those things to yourself. And so you're hearing it, but all it's doing is simply just, I guess, adding on to or expanding or whatever you want to call it, what you've already poured into yourself. And that is true self-love. Right? True self-love is being at a place in which the world no longer shakes you. And the thing about being so heavily reliant on external compliments is that whenever someone isn't validating you, you don't feel good about yourself. And whenever someone criticizes you, it takes you all the way down here. I think it was sort of Sir Isaac Newton that said, for every force there's an equal or opposite force, right? So if someone's compliment can take you all the way up here, their criticism can take you all the way down here. And you don't want to be at a point in your life, and most people in the world are like this. You don't want to be at a point in which you're constantly reacting to the world, I should say, right? You don't want to be at that point. You want to be at a point in your life in which your foundation is solid, in which your foundation is set, right? In which your house is stable, in which your world is stable. That's where you want to be in your life. And it all begins by pouring love into yourself. It all begins the moment you stop withholding love from yourself and you begin to validate yourself. You begin to affirm yourself. You begin to pour into yourself right where you are every single day, even in the simplest and littlest moments. It begins right there. Because those small moments, those small things, those small actions, those small acts of love that we do towards ourselves with intention, they add up, they amount. And before you know it, you're going to get to a point in which you look back at your past self and you can't even recognize that person. Right? Take it from me. You're going to look back at the past you and you're going to say to yourself, I really felt that way about myself. I really allowed myself to be in that circumstance in which I knew I deserved better. I really allowed people to talk to me like that. I really allowed myself to beg and plead for people to stay in my life. You're gonna look back at your past self and you're gonna sort of feel kind of disgusted, right? Disgusted of the things that you allowed. Disgusted of the fact that, you felt so much disdain and dislike for yourself, because you're gonna get to a point in which the love that you have for yourself is so intense, is so great, that you don't even have the words to explain it, right? That's how much you're going to grow when you begin to pour into yourself, when you begin to give love to yourself, right? And I think whenever you place limitations on your self-love, you also place limitations on your growth. Because the truth is that growth can only occur through love, right? A lot of us have this idea that we can sort of hate ourselves into growing, right? We constantly focus on the things that we lack. We constantly focus on the things that we don't have. We constantly focus on where we fall short. We constantly focus on our shortcomings, right? We focus on all the negative aspects or the things that we've yet to achieve or yet to get to, right? And this is not to say you can't acknowledge your shortcomings. This is not to say you can't acknowledge how far, you probably have to go, or the things that you want to achieve, right? But I think if that's all we focus on, if all we focus on is what we lack, then that's all we're growing, right? Because your intention, your focus, your attention amplifies and magnifies and grows anything. And so if you want to grow, if you want to step into a better version of yourself, if you want to get to a point in which you love yourself deeply, in which the love that you have for yourself is intense, you have to begin to intentionally focus on the good parts of yourself. Focus on the things that you have. Be grateful for the things that you have. Be grateful for who you are, right? Intentionally pour love into yourself. It begins right there. Because like I just said, love, or growth I should say, can only blossom through love. You can't hate yourself into growing, right? You really can't. A lot of people think they're hating themselves into growing by focusing on where they fall short, but all they're doing is creating more resentment for themselves, right? You begin to grow the more you give love to yourself. You begin to grow the more you begin to be more grateful for yourself. You begin to grow and heal the more you give yourself compassion, the more you give yourself grace, the more you give yourself empathy, the more you forgive yourself for the things of your past, for the circumstances of your past. That's the only way you're gonna grow. And all those things that I just mentioned, all of them fall under self-love. All of them. Every single one of them. Right? So stop placing limitations on the love that you give to yourself. Stop thinking that you have to get to a certain point to begin to pour into yourself. Stop thinking that the you that is right here isn't deserving of love because you don't have a certain thing, because you're not at a certain point. Stop thinking those things and stop placing conditions and limitations on your self-love. Your self-love should be unconditional. No matter where you are, no matter what you have, no matter what circumstance you find yourself in, you are worthy of love. You are. Right? No one can decide you're not worthy of love but you. No one can dictate your value but you. Right? How you feel about yourself is always in your hands. And it begins with recognizing that you have the ability to be the object of your own love. You have the capacity. There's so much love within you. Right? So much within you that is waiting to receive your love. You are your own source. And once you begin to recognize that, once you begin to realize that only you can affirm your worth, only you can give yourself the love that you need, keyword need, only you can be your own source, only you can pour into yourself the right way. Once you begin to realize these things, and you stop looking to the world, because you have it all right here. You truly do. So yeah, that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys got something from the video. And yeah, stop placing limitations on your self-love. Stop thinking that you need to get to a certain point or have a certain thing to be worthy of love. And recognize that love can be given to yourself on the daily. in the simple things that we do. But our ability to recognize and find those moments where we can pour love into our actions towards ourselves ultimately determines how we feel about ourselves on a long-term basis. But those small actions, those small intentions, they add up. They truly do. And once you begin to recognize the magnitude or how important they are, once you begin to recognize that self-love, and you get into a point in which you're truly loving yourself, truly embodying that love, once you begin to recognize that point you want to get to begins in the small, simple actions, in the small, simple moments of our everyday life, then you will begin to take those moments seriously. Right? Thank you guys for watching. Hope y'all are doing well. Give yourself a little bit of love, like I always say. And I will see y'all in the next one. Peace and blessings.